So that's how I ended up with my new rocket book. Ain't that some shit?
That's. I mean, it's cool. You got it for free, though, right? I mean, really, at the end of the day, by any means necessary, huh?
So yeah, we were not too happy about that whole situation.
Oh, I can imagine. That's.
All it would have took was one email, or wait a day.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm not sure exactly what this box is for, so let me hang on to it.
I had a box of T-shirts that ended up being left over from an event we had with a client. I held that shit for a year.
Yeah.
Just in case, and then let everybody take what they wanted.
Yeah. That's the thing. Sometimes I don't know, just the communication aspect of sometimes with big expensive things. It's like you'll be like, "Hey man, I really this is my favorite pin, don't lose it." Somebody will guard it with their life, but then a box of diamonds will show up and they'll be like, "I don't know, just toss it over there." You know, you're like
So you can go a full day of taking notes and then come home, scan it, clean your notebook, and it's ready for the next day.
You know, how much does one of those cost new?
This one right here with the planner and everything is $30.
Oh right, I think I might have found a solution. Cause so remember when I was writing and publishing all the time, and then I hit a stumbling block. And my stumbling block was that new job that I struggled through for a year. But the thing was, what I used to do was I'd sit down every night after the kids went to bed, and I'd fire up my laptop, and I'd be like, okay, the guy just turned the corner, there's the monster, let's start writing. And I'd just sit there click-a-clack for a couple hours, and then I'd write the story until it was done, and then I'd go back and re-edit, and, I'd call it the baking. I'd set it to the side, and I'd look at it, and then work on something else. Well, my time went to such where I was so tired and exhausted, and my brain was just fried, so I couldn't really write, but I'd still have ideas. But I write them down in these kind of notebooks. But the problem is I very rarely go back to my notebooks because my style, my writing is I have a tendency to scare myself when I'm writing stories. Because I think if I'm not scared, how can I expect a reader to be scared?
Right.
So I put myself in a mindset, and I, lower the lights, and I have a few drinks, and I sit there and I just kind of mentally throw myself into the situation. And so where you hear writers will say, just let the characters talk to you, it's not bullshit. It really does happen, right? And you can feel it sometimes when you're watching a movie or reading a book, but especially with movies, where the scares don't quite land. It's like there's something that should be scary, or there's an eerie sort of situation, but the writer just wasn't deft enough to drop the scare in. So I have a lot of really good ideas, but my notebooks very rarely make it onto. But if I were to sit down and be like, write a couple paragraphs, and then I can just scan it and drop it into my computer, to where I'm not really rewriting it as such, as then I just have a piece I need to go back and edit. Right. That would solve a lot of my problems.
There's even a full page of ideas. Like during the day, if you get an idea, you rate it, and you figure out what the next step is. It's pretty cool. It's a neat little.
That's rad. Setup. I might have to get one of those.
This version was $30, but they have them between 20 and 50.
Yeah, there's a thing called I don't even know what it's called. It's I forgot to pour myself one. It's some sort of notebook where I'll grab one in a second. It's some sort of notebook where as you're writing, you can write and it feels like paper, but either through the stylus or through the paper. It's almost like a Kindle. It senses your writing and it'll transfer it like via cloud or like almost like via Bluetooth and translate it to text. So you can sit there and you can write a story or a letter longhand and it'll type it out for you as you're doing it. Those things cost like $300.
Damn.
Yeah. That's a lot of trying to avoid laziness. It's a lot of money to put into being lazy. All right, got myself one. Got a couple of beers sitting here ready to be cracked open. We're ready to go. It is episode 183 of the Scary Dad podcast. It's July 24th, 2023. So we're about halfway through this brutal ass summer that is just killing us. And so to keep with the kind of current events theme that we've been following, we're gonna talk about when nature attacks.
Because this heat has been trying to kill us.
Yes, very much so. So let's have a drink to start the show.
Cheers.
Salute. There's a little bit of Crown Royal there, little endorsement. And I gotta say a welcome to any of our new listeners that might have been picked up by my daughter distributing stickers at her summer camp. So she has a Scary Dad sticker on her water bottle. My children go to the summer camp where they get to swim and play and do all kinds of fun stuff, and somebody noticed her sticker and asked her about it, and she's like, oh, my dad does a podcast. And then she came home the next day and was like, they listen to your podcast. So I was like, okay, well, how old are these people? Because Autumn's 9,
Right.
And,
Not sure if we cater to the 9-year-old demographic.
She said the people asking are college age. I'm like, okay, so college age is good. So welcome to the show. If you caught us last week whenever my brain was fried, it's not quite as fried this week. And but that doesn't mean it won't get that way, because we got plenty of beer sitting here. So hope you enjoy the show. Mr. Gomez.
First, the old business.
All right. So now we're going to go back to 1994. Remember what you were doing in 1994?
I know what I should have been doing.
Me too.
I'm not sure if I was actually doing it. I was working on the cruise ship in 1994, actually.
I was
doing a lot of partying.
I was doing a lot of partying. I was drinking beer and hanging out with my buddy down the street. Had a pool. Still, like going out to, I think in 1994 I was still working at Radio Shack, and those were some long ass days. But I was a good salesman, so I had a lot of cash. And we were going out at night, seeing shows. That was 90 in April of 94 was when we lost Nirvana, right? So that whole wave of grunge was still riding pretty high, and every night, new band, new club. If they weren't playing live, we were listening to that stuff.
That was the year I turned 21. So.
94, I was 19, so I was still living at home, no responsibilities. I posted on Facebook. This is probably 10 years ago, but it's still true. There was a radio station here in Houston. It was we had 101 KLOL, which was the rock and roll station, and that's where Outlaw Dave
I
was,
remember.
Right? Stevens and Pruitt. It was the rock radio station. Well, then we got a Z-Rock station. It was 106.9 Z-Rock, and Z-Rock was the branded rock radio station out of it was a national, and 101 had been playing a lot of classic rock, and then Z-Rock came in and was playing a lot of new stuff. So Z-Rock was kicking it with Metallica and Megadeth and Guns N' Roses and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And 101 then, in response, got a bit heavier to respond. So I remember sitting out by the pool, and you'd hear a dong to start a song. And that was really the only thing that I gave a shit about, is whether or not that bell meant that we were going to listen to For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica or Hell's Bells by AC/DC. One of them I really enjoyed, and one of them, not as much.
Right.
So Do you remember those days when that's all you gave a shit about? It's
Yeah.
like, you're in the pool. What are we going to do later? Are we going to do anything?
Very few responsibilities.
Are we going to do anything? Oh, I heard there was this thing going on down there, and we might have to hit up Chris's older brother to get us some beer so that so we can't show up to the party empty-handed. Good times. But yeah, not that is a weird introduction to the fact that the top of the pops on this date in 1994 kind of sucked. Number one song was "I Swear" by All For One. I would have, if before I wrote this down, I would have sworn it was Boyz II Men.
Really? No, it wasn't.
Well, I mean,
I remember that song.
There was a whole lot of barbershop quartet
Yeah.
groups that were following that Boyz II Men model.
Right.
And they had a lot of big hits, and they all kind of around at the same time. So, you know. Stay by Lisa Loeb from the soundtrack of Reality Bites.
I remember that, yes.
I remember when Reality Bites came out, everybody was so excited because it was filmed in Houston. That's our big claim to fame, is either Reality Bites or frickin' RoboCop 2.
RoboCop 2, I was going to say. To me, that's the bigger one.
Yeah, that's a better one. Then there you got Regulate by Warren G and Nate Dogg. That was all over.
Classic song.
That was everywhere. That was all over the Anytime, Any Place by Janet Jackson.
I remember it.
You know, don't do like you did last week and just be like, anytime, any place. You know that song.
I remember that one.
Don't Turn Around by Ace of Base.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Fantastic.
Ace of Base, Jesus.
I know, right? You know what was weird about Ace of Base? Because they were a copy of ABBA.
Yeah.
You know, and had that same formula. So you had the blonde chick, and I guess she was either a redhead or a brunette chick. But the redhead or brunette chick, the darker haired one of the two, was cuter than the blonde. Mm-hmm. But things being things, they would focus on the blonde. So like, if you ever watch one of their videos, now that I pointed out, you're like, oh, she's hot. They'd focus on her for like half a second, and then cut back over to the blonde one. And I'm like, dude, you've got like a whole room full of hot chicks, and you're only focusing on the
That
one.
one, right.
What are you doing? Let's see. Fantastic Voyage by Coolio.
Okay.
I told you my Coolio story last week.
Yes. Coolio.
And then Can You Feel the Love by Elton John. I guess that's from Tarzan.
Yeah, I think so. Was it from Tarzan?
Lion King. That was it.
Okay.
Right, yeah. All right, so top music wasn't great. There was some good stuff out there. I wasn't listening to it because I was listening to Z-Rock. All right. In movies this week in 1994, we get a little bit better. Number one movie at the time was Forrest Gump. That was cutting edge right then. Remember?
It was a huge movie, just because they were using
movie.
all the editing where they replaced them in historic scenes and everything. And yeah, that was a pretty amazing movie.
Yeah.
All around.
And it's one of the few movies that really actually ever has made me cry, just because of the way whenever she dies and he's like at her grave talking about their son, and I'm just like, oh my God. Right?
He didn't go full retard. That scene keeps popping up on Instagram Reels right now. It keeps popping up right now, man.
I think that's a sign that even though it's not a horror movie, we probably need to do a fresh eyes on Tropic Thunder, because I haven't seen that movie in forever. And
Tom Hanks, Forrest Gump, braces on his legs. But he won a ping pong tournament.
Not full retard. So, who is it? Then he said, was it Sean Penn?
Yeah.
He went full retard. He came home empty-handed.
He goes, you don't believe me? Look at Sean Penn.
Oh, and the controversy, because his character was perfect, right? Of course, blackface is unacceptable, but in context of that film,
He was making it a parody of people doing blackface.
Yeah,
it was.
it was so funny, dude. He was so good at
He
it.
starts doing the Jeffersons theme song. Round up some crawdads out the patty. Give me some of them greens. Back when I was a saucier out in San Antonio.
Start, just every stereotype is just it's just rough. But And they've asked him since, because he's freaking Iron Man. Like, they've asked him since, and he's just like, I don't think it would be acceptable. But,
I did what I did.
All right. Then there was The Client. That's a Tom Cruise joint, I believe.
Wasn't The Client one of those Grisham
books?
Yeah.
Well, excuse me 1 second. Then The Lion King.
That would make sense with Elton John.
Yeah, that's why I was like, wait a second, there's that. Because I think it was Phil Collins did Tarzan.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
You know, one thing I was noticing, and I'm sure it's been talked about a lot, what the hell were they putting in English water in like the 50s and 60s? Because all of the, like, we talk about Elton John, right? Mm-hmm. English. Phil Collins and Genesis, English. Who are your favorite bands? Most of them are English. Mm-hmm. If you say your top 10 favorite bands, I guarantee you a lot of them are in that top 10 are English. You know,
right.
Like Pink Floyd, they're English.
Stones.
English. Beatles, English. Def Leppard, English. Freaking, like, all the way down into some of the heavier metal stuff. You know, Iron Maiden, they're right. English, you know. Ozzy. It's just like English, like, they produced a crop of incredible musicians that were just phenomenal and just superstar. You know, like, what's your favorite American band? You're like Guns N' Roses, and then it goes back to Iron Maiden or you know, some of these others. It's phenomenal how great English music really is.
Yeah.
All right. So then we had Speed, Keanu Reeves, Dennis Hopper. Speed was a good movie. Mm-hmm. It was fun. Kind of lost its. I didn't believe part 2. It's like, oh, now there's a bomb in a cruise ship. Come on.
Just so happens this is happening to him again.
Because the guy who put the bomb in the bus died, so he's dealing with a whole new bomber.
Like, well, look at Die Hard. You had his brother come back in 3.
Yeah, this is just,
I know.
I lost it. Like the feasibility factor. Just like, what are the odds? And then finally, Schindler's List. That was one hell of a list. You were making out during Schindler's List? Yeah. How dare you? All right. If you were watching TV, you would have seen Chuck Norris kick some ass very slowly in Walker, Texas Ranger.
Lone Wolf McQuade was on one of the streaming channels the other day. I watched a little bit of it. I forgot that Dave Carradine was in it. Totally forgot that he was in it, but I hadn't seen it in a long time.
Old Chuck Norris movies are awesome.
Yeah.
Like, they're really good. And it's funny, too, because, you know, I don't know how often you listen to Joe Rogan, but he's all into MMA, and he'll talk about different people that are famous or whatever. And like, somebody asked him one time, it's like, so, you know, of the famous, like, people like, I don't know, The Rock, who's a wrestler and stuff like that. He's like, who's legit? And he's like, Chuck Norris would kill you. Like, Chuck Norris has got, like, he's legit. Like, he was a complete superstar champion long before he got into movies. Mm-hmm. And then he kept up. I'm like, the dude's almost 80 now, and he still kicks ass. He's awesome. Then the X-Files. The X-Files is great. Like, it was so scary when it first came out, because they were investigating ghosts and werewolves, and like it was really suspenseful.
But just like any series, you start running out of material and you start reaching. And
I mean, well, they ran out of material. They jumped to Shark, and then they just kept on going, and then made movies. Beavis and Butthead. I love Beavis and Butthead.
I still love Beavis and Butthead.
They were so good. Frasier. I think the funniest thing about Frasier is, like, him and his brother were both sideshow on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Lois and Clark. You know, that Superman joint. Martin. remember Martin got in trouble for saying wash your ass. And everybody was all mad, and then he, like, instead of apologizing, he's like, the only people that would be mad are the people that ain't washing their ass. Melrose Place, Seinfeld, and we've been watching Seinfeld a lot lately. It holds up. It's a show about nothing.
It's a great. The kids actually have been deep diving into it.
Seinfeld's awesome.
So, yeah, it's good stuff.
And Roseanne, man, I watched. Dude, I watched a thing. I thought it was last night actually. I don't know if it was her podcast or if she was on somebody else's podcast, but they were like. He said something. It's like, oh, people appreciated the fact that John Goodman has said that he doesn't think you're a racist. And she's like, big fucking deal. She's like, where was he? Like, it took him 3 months after I'd already been fired, after they'd already split up my money, after they dragged my name through the mud and all this stuff. And then when it was safe to poke his little head out, he's like, fuck them all. I was like, damn.
Well, she had recently did that Theo Von podcast, which kind of blew up with some of her comments that Theo Von even says were edited improperly. But then she went on some other news show on one of the news network bullshit stations that I don't watch, and she went all in and just started saying crazy shit, dude.
There's two things about Roseanne that are absolutely true. One, she kind of got a raw deal because she was obviously making a completely out of context joke while she was on prescription medication.
Yeah.
And it didn't land
at all.
But anybody who is in any slight way familiar with comedy knows sarcasm and knows that she was not specifically targeting this person. She was just kind of making a joke that didn't work. Kind of like you're holding glasses in your hand. I don't see you with glasses often. So if I walk up to you and I'm like, "What up, Four Eyes?" and you're like, "Oh man, I just got diagnosed with eye cancer," like, "Oh crap,
it fell flat."
That joke didn't land, and I didn't mean any harm. I was obviously joking, and you know me as not being malicious.
Right.
So therefore, we'll let it pass. Just don't say it again. But,
yeah, now you know. Yeah.
But that whole thing where she got kicked off her show was obviously a joke that didn't land, and it was not malicious. It was inebriated. The stuff she said on Theo Von, whenever I watched, because I don't follow Theo Von, but he did release like the unedited stuff.
Yeah.
And did you see the unedited stuff?
I never watched the unedited stuff. I just saw his comments about it.
So remember last week when we were talking about the aliens among us sort of thing? She was talking about like the control systems that are in Hollywood and the stuff that you're allowed to say and the stuff you're not allowed to say and the things that are kind of swept under the rug. And when she said stuff like that, she's like, one of the things, it's like you can't talk about people in power censoring things. You can't talk about, certain things. And as a kind of segue between one subject and another, she's like, it's like the Holocaust didn't happen, and she rolls her eyes in such a way that it's like, it's like people can say stuff that is not true all the time, but there's only certain things you'll get in trouble for saying.
Yeah.
Is exactly what her point was. Like this thing. And then they cut out the like this thing and then just put that thing up and like, look what she said. And it was just like, but if you listen to the whole talk,
it makes more sense.
It makes a lot more sense why she would say something like that. And that was where, because Theo Von is not any stranger to saying some crazy shit.
No shit.
Like
the dude's a trip, bro.
He
LSU alum. He went to LSU too.
While he was on LSD.
My favorite type of marijuana is cocaine.
Yeah.
That was like the first thing I ever saw of him was him saying my favorite type of weed is cocaine.
But that's it for the old business. We'll take a break and come back with the new.
to come running in from the lobby thinking that they missed something. Hi, I'm Ed Stewart, movie star, also known as Bobcat Goldthwait, and me and my friends John Cusack and Demi Moore.
I hate boats. I'm not getting on any boat.
I beg to differ.
Just had one crazy summer.
Your dad said you were collecting shells.
Shells? 57 millimeter. We did all the normal things people do. Hey, little boy, will you hold on to this for me? Made friends. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Saw the sights.
Please, your enormous is anything but chilly.
Killed our own food. Dazzled women.
Are you ready for me, Hoops?
We were party animals. Everyone loved us.
My car.
And we loved every minute. By the end of the summer, I felt I'd grown a lot personally. I felt a little bit better about who I was and where I was going. Okay, let's move it out. Here we go. Wave. It really was one crazy summer.
Before you get started, I'm going to say, I said there was two things that are true about Roseanne. I said the first one. The second one is she's batshit crazy.
Oh yeah.
She is very, very mentally ill.
One of the things I was so disappointed when Tom Arnold had canceled last year was I really wanted to hear some stories. I wanted to hear him talk some shit about the craziness that it was being married to that woman. Because he's got some stories.
Oh, yeah.
Because think about couples fight and shit happens. Imagine what went on in that house.
Yeah.
I can promise you some crazy shit. Okay, so we're getting to new business. There's not a whole lot today, but I'll go ahead and give it to Mr. Gomez.
New business is new business, and this is new business.
Okay. So one of the reasons there's not a lot today is because work's been crazy with people stealing Rocket books, and the Houston Horror Film Fest is coming up pretty quick, so we're having to try to get everything finalized. I still got to get volunteer emails out and all kind of shit this week. Got my vendors finally lined up, but this whole Screen Actors Guild strike is
threatening.
As it was happening. So an hour before they announced the strike, we're in a meeting at the hotel, going over everything. I got to go over the number of tables we need and all kind of shit. We have 2 more meetings till the actual event, but that was like one of the final meetings where she needs to get her shit together. And me and Tony are both sitting there, and our phones are just going off. And once they announced the strike, that's it. People are messaging what's going on, and for the longest time, there was so much gray area. Like, had no idea what the fuck we could do, what would happen. Would anybody be able to do anything? How many people were going to cancel, so on and so forth. And SAG actually came out yesterday with their specific rules for conventions. Finally. So we have a lot of clarification now, but it's just a lot of things have to be different. The show's still going on, of course, but it is just this all kind of crazy shit. One of the things is okay, so you know how normally a talent will be sitting at a table and they'll have 8x10s of all kind of cool shit. Now they can only have headshots. They cannot have 8x10s of any specific scenes from a movie. But if you were to bring your own 8x10, they can sign it. They just can't provide it themselves. If you bring a movie poster, they can sign it. It's just a lot of shit. Their banners aren't supposed to depict anything from any franchises. So, like the guy that dresses up as Ghostface in Scream that's coming, he can't have Ghostface on his banner. He can't have any 8x10s of him in the Ghostface costume.
So they're just suffering. It's not the fans, but most fans bring stuff, or they'll buy it from a vendor and then.
Yeah, and a lot of fans are frustrated too, which it's kind of I'm not going to say it's a selfish thing, but it's a thing that you might want to step back and look at. Like, I've seen people saying, they can't, if you sign your name, you can't reference a character name or quote anything from that work. And people are furious about that. Because you have a lot of people that have these posters that, they want every single person to sign it, and every single other person has put their character name, and now if they get a signature, it kind of messes up the aesthetic, which... First world problems, there's worse shit that can happen, but it's to someone that values that the way a lot of fans do. It's a big deal to them.
Yeah, of course. I think it's And don't get me wrong, because I do follow a lot of actors and writers and such on social media that all have their various opinions and whatever. These studios really are playing dirty. I mean,
some of this shit, the whole background actor AI thing is fucking horrible.
Well, that is a problem. But I'm talking about when the studios are straight up like, we'll just starve them out.
Yeah.
They'll just start losing their houses, and then they'll come back to the table. And I'm just like, that is the most cruel shit. Because I'm a billionaire. I can just sit here and wait you out.
Right. My money is making money.
I'm like, people are still going to be renting movies. They're still going to go to the movies. I don't think Barbie is going to be hurt that bad because Margot Robbie can't go out and like sign autographs.
Right.
Like she might not be able to do some press and talk interviews, but a lot of actors don't like doing that anyway. So like, oh wait, I don't have to get pushed out, and I don't have to do ET or whatever. So for the actors to step in on their behalf and work towards helping the writers, I think is noble, and I think it's necessary, and I think it's awesome. To have, when you think about conventions, though, if somebody like Robert Englund, puts a quotation mark with Freddie, it's not as if either person, like, Film Festival is not making any money. Like, they sold tickets. The studio's not making any money. They made their money.
Not making or losing any money.
If somebody like Robert Englund is producing his own 8x10s and selling them to put money into his pocket because of something he did, then I don't understand where that's supporting the studios.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah,
and I've seen some of those other rules where it's just, it's like, well.
And the biggest thing that's affected are panels, of course. You can't have a cast panel for Halloween. They have to talk about something else. But the thing about it is, it's also going to open the door to some interesting panels, too, where away from the topics we usually do. We'll probably lose a few of our films that are submitted. Unfortunately, we won't be able to screen those, but we're trying to get all that lined up. And what's the most frustrating thing about all this? Shit might be over Friday.
Yeah, you don't know, because then it'll just turn back around and be normal.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen with it. So moving on to more happy news. Kind of. Let's head over to Jerusalem, Israel.
Oh, fun.
12-year-old Suleiman Hassan. What makes Suleiman so exciting? Suleiman was riding his bike down the road one day and a car hit him. He suffered something that is called a atlanto-occipital dislocation. Do you know what that means?
I do not.
I'll tell you what it means right now. It's an internal decapitation. Kid was totally decapitated. Spine totally severed. The vertebrae were separate from each other, but the skin was still attached around his neck. Okay. You want to know why it's important to make sure you don't move somebody after an accident and be rough with them and wait for the paramedics to come and put them in traction? This kid is one of the reasons why. So this kid literally had his vertebrae. He was decapitated except for the skin holding everything together. Doctors reattached his head. He is not paralyzed in the least. He's still walking around and doing just fine.
Wow.
Amazing. Yeah, these doctors were able to, the surgery took several hours, but they were able to go ahead and reattach his spinal cord, his spine, with no damage to the cord at all. It's pretty fucking amazing.
Wow.
That is a very, very amazing.
Was the cord severed?
The cord wasn't severed. It was only the vertebrae. The vertebrae separated, but the cord was still together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is amazing. Because that's a very delicate bundle of nerves that can be damaged very, very easily. This kid was literally decapitated, and they put his head back together.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought that was, when I saw that story, the headline, of course, doctors reattached decapitated boy's head after 12-year-old struck in a horror accident. It caught my attention.
Of course.
Needless to say. And staying on the topic of skulls. So FBI agent went over to a gentleman by the name of James Knott in Mount Washington, I believe, Kentucky. Apparently, the FBI had been doing an investigation into the trafficking of human body parts. Did you hear what I just said? Mm-hmm. Human body parts. And they began investigating Knott after it was discovered he had chatted with a guy named Jeremy Pauley from Pennsylvania, who had been investigated for his role in a nationwide scheme to purchase and sell human remains. So they show up at Knott's home, and we say, "Hey, dude, are you here alone?" And he told everyone, "No one was home except for my dead friends." At which point, the FBI agents entered the home and found dozens of human remains, including 40 human skulls, spinal cords, femurs, and hip bones. The agent later wrote that the skulls were decorated around furniture. One skull had a headscarf around it. One skull was located on the mattress where Knott slept. So this dude was picking up human body parts from this dude and decorating his house and basically setting them up like he was friends. This is straight Ed Gein shit, dude.
That's weird.
So of course he was arrested and he will be charged, and they will continue investigating this nationwide thing to see who else they can pick up.
See, it's one of those things where it's like back in the day you could buy like shark's teeth, taxidermy, you know, like you get a deer head mounted or whatever. And as time has gone on, I think that a lot of that kind of stuff has sort of fallen out of favor. Like, it probably still has its pockets of popularity, but a lot of people think it's kind of more creepy or just less, it's not tasteful, you know, it's not necessarily dignified for the animal after, you know, if you're gonna, like, my sister used to tell a joke, it's like you're like a prized fish. I don't know if I want to mount you or eat you, because you can't do both, right? You have to take the fish to get mounted. You can't fillet it. But like, so I can see why it would be interesting to like have a human skull. You're like, that's kind of creepy.
Yeah,
that's kind of weird. That's kind of curious. I wonder how he died. I wonder how he lost that tooth. Was it still embedded when he lived, or like did he lose it before? But more than one, you're beyond the curiosities. You're beyond the weird goth person that just likes creepy stuff. If you have more than one skull, something's wrong with you. Just for our people out there that don't know, if you've got a skull and you're thinking about buying a second one, think again. Like that makes you weird.
At that point, there's an issue. Moving on to something a little bit more lighthearted, let's head down to St. Pete Beach, Florida. Florida's always fun.
Florida's good.
46-year-old Sarah Ann Cochera was down at Rick's Reef for an evening of eating and drinks when her and her live-in boyfriend, who has not been named, began quarreling inside of the restaurant. She got very, very angry, at which point she grabbed her burrito and, like a scene out of a Three Stooges chart, threw it at her boyfriend, where he ducked, and it flew and hit a passerby directly in the face. And she was charged with burrito assault and arrested for hitting the victim in the face with her burrito. There's nothing indicating whether or not the man was injured by said burrito, but
he's certainly pissed.
He did decide to call the police, and when the police showed up, of course, Miss Cochera was no longer around, but she was in the area, and deputies were able to find her, at which point she was being non-cooperative. They arrested her, charged with disorderly conduct, and booked in the county jail and released.
I do have to say, this is a confession. I don't think I've ever spoken about it on the show before, but I'm guilty of burrito assault.
You have? Was it Taco Bell or?
No, dude. We were at Lollapalooza, actually in 1994, when Green Day headlined. We were at Lollapalooza, and it had been rainy, so everything was very muddy and steamy and dirty. And me and my friends were on all kinds of recreational fun stuff, and went to one of the food vendors and bought myself a burrito. And I remember it because it was like $8, and I was like, damn, $8 is a lot for a burrito, but we are at a concert, so whatever. And I got this burrito, and it was like the size of a small baby. It's just this hoss of a burrito. And I've been, dehydrated and drinking all day and everything, so like when I first started eating it, it was heavenly. It's just like the best burrito ever. But it was so freaking big that I got full, but I still had like 3/4 of a burrito left and no place to put it. Like, they don't rent lockers at Lollapalooza.
Right.
You just got this aluminum foil bag of burrito. So I had gotten separated from my friends. I didn't know where anybody was. I assumed they were in the pit. I don't know. But I was high as fuck. So I was just like, this was back in the day when me and my friends were just pranksters. We were just a walking felony. We were. So I'm standing at the back of the crowd, and there's a pretty good pit going on for whoever's playing. And I try to take one more bite of burrito, and I look around for a trash can. I finally give up, and I'm like,
We pretend it's a beach ball? Is that basically what you thought?
I unfolded it, wrapped it tight, and then just like side-armed it out into the pit. And I watched it explode. So there's probably about 10 or 15 people out there that just got burrito bombed. So,
well, just what's interesting is, just so you know, not the day this was released, but the day before we were recording this is the anniversary of the first ever Lollapalooza in Phoenix, Arizona.
I thought you were
July
going to say
18th.
that's when the statute of limitations on burrito assault runs out.
July 18th,
You're safe
1991,
now.
which is pretty interesting.
Your confession came a day after. We can't charge you anymore.
I didn't go to that first one. I did go to the second one in 1992, but that first year I did not make it, but I definitely was there in 1992. Jane's Addiction, Beastie Boys, all kind of fucking awesome bands.
Yeah, that 94 was when Smashing Pumpkins headlined it.
Okay.
Well, Beastie Boys and Smashing Pumpkins co-headlined it, and some idiot somewhere, probably an accountant, put Beastie Boys on before Smashing Pumpkins. So you can imagine Beastie Boys come out, they are on the Ill Communication. Sabotage is all over the radio, plus everything that they've come before. But the Beastie Boys come out, and whether you like the Beastie Boys or not, there was absolutely no way to escape that groove. They were insane.
So,
and the sun's kind of coming down behind the stadium, or like behind, so it's starting to get dark, and the lights are starting to come on. And whenever that breakdown, like after the bridge of Sabotage, where they're like, wow, you look out across a crowd, and it's just like thousands of kids jumping up and down in unison. They look like all the carp at the zoo whenever you used to feed food pellets, and they're just like, ah. As far as the eye can see. It's insane. It was so beautiful. It was awesome. Then they finish their set, and Smashing Pumpkins comes on stage, and they're all like, like they just couldn't,
right.
Like mass exodus. People just started leaving because they couldn't hold on.
Right.
Like, they couldn't keep the interest.
Yeah, there's no way they
just
could live up to
blew
that.
everybody out.
I remember when I saw Beastie Boys at Lollapalooza the year before, the pit was just nuts. And we're right outside of the pit, but we're loving the show. We're just enjoying ourselves. And we had a friend of ours with us, Ashley, and some dudes were crowd surfing, and somebody accidentally kicked her in the head, and we were drunk and hot, and she passed out. We took her. I remember.
Put her up on the thing.
No, we looked over, and there was like a spot where nobody was standing. We dragged her over there and propped her up against this wall, and went back and finished watching. Every once in a while, we'd look over and make sure she was safe and shit, but like she wasn't gonna let that spoil our fun.
Of course.
Fuck. You're gonna be that close to the pit. You gotta watch out for it.
When people get knocked out, you just put them up and crowd surf them over to security and drop them in that little aisle between the gate and the stage.
Yep.
Like, here, this one's out, and they're like, take them over to the infirmary.
But I do have to say, compared to Lollapalooza, and we recently went to Sick New World in Vegas, pits have really gone downhill.
Oh yeah.
these kids don't know how to do it anymore. Dude, we're watching Cradle of Filth. Did you hear what I just said? Cradle of Filth. There was no pit.
Were they just tired, or they just didn't know what to do?
Possibly tired, but there was no pit. But even the ones that we saw pits, they were weak as fuck, dude.
I remember those, like the pit, getting in pits used to be dangerous for me because I had long hair, and so we went to see Nine Inch Nails play with David Bowie, and the opening band was a band called Prick, which if you've never heard of them, they're awesome. But it was not a Nine Inch Nails level pit, but it was a Nine Inch Nails opening band level pit, right? The pit broke out, and I got knocked over, and then somebody stood on my hair, and somebody else was trying to help me up. And so somebody would pull my arms, and my hair would my head would yank back because I had people standing on my hair. I'm like, God damn it, because my hair tie broke. So yeah, enjoying concerts is a little different. We went to The Cure, and you like sit there and be like, oh, I know this song, and the person sitting next to you was like, yeah, it's great, and you're like, that's not supposed to happen. Like, your ears are supposed to be ringing. Like, what the hell?
Right.
Everything's supposed to be able to smell like tobacco and weed and body odor and bad decisions.
There was, when Korn was playing, because I wanted to go see Ministry. Everybody else wanted to go see Korn. I went to see Uncle Al. So Uncle Al finishes, and Korn is still going on. So at that point, there were 4 stages. So at that point, the stage Korn was on, there were literally 50,000 people. So I get there, there's no way I'm gonna find Tony and Justin and them. So I'm just hanging out by myself towards the back with everybody. You know how concerts are. Everybody's just chilling, grooving to the music and shit. I'm smoking a cigarette. This kid walks up. He goes, "Can I borrow your lighter?" And I said, "Yeah." I give him a lighter, and he goes, "You smoke weed?" And I said, "Yeah."
I do today, sir.
And he pulls out this pre-rolled cone blunt, and he goes, "You started off." And I was like, "Yes, sir." So I was literally by myself for half the Korn set, high as fuck, not knowing where anybody else was. It was awesome. But I did find everybody by the time we got the system up and down, and I was feeling very good with the vibe and having a blast, dude.
That's the way it should be, man.
It is so nuts. No, Olivia's music taste has grown a lot more like me than Noah even. She was at a party yesterday at somebody's house, and they were doing karaoke, and she's sending me screenshots of the song she's singing, and she's sending like White Zombie, System of a Down. She said all this shit. I'm like, this is my 17-year-old kid that's doing it. She knows all this shit. It's fucking awesome. But yeah, so that's it for new business. Of course, other than the fact that we have some of the craziest weather going on right now as we've seen in a long time. And the thing about it is we're having incredibly oppressive heat. It's breaking records from, like, let's say 1974 and shit. But the thing that is different about this year is how long it's lasting. Because of this weird high pressure system that has decided to kind of stall out over us. I want to say Phoenix is on its 19th day of insufferable heat. That is, it's literally killing people at this point, and there's no sign of it stopping. It is fucking nuts. I mean, Vegas was 118 the other day for the, for God knows how many times. It's nuts how bad it is. Phoenix, Arizona, and that southwest corner of the United States, including California, is even seeing triple-digit numbers right now. That's where it's really sitting right now, and that's the thing. What we're getting isn't the worst. Think about what we're dealing with right now. It's not even the worst. And you're talking about light bills and shit, and I've actually come to the point where I'm accepting the fact most central units aren't going to give you more than a 20-25 degree differential between what it is outside and what it is inside. I'm not keeping my thermostat at 70 anymore. I'm raising it up during the day to like 72, 74 because I'll never see that temperature anyway, and I want the air conditioner to turn off every once in a while because it is insane how bad it's getting. Man.
Oh, well, too, yeah, and that's the. We always have that same joke, and I've lived here my whole life. There was never a problem with the power grid, and then everybody started moving into the state. And then we're like, okay, well, we need more power. And they're like, okay, well, let's build windmills. We'll paint rainbows on them. And there will be unicorns and freaking angels farting. But then when it gets cold, the windmills freeze. And when it gets hot, the wind ain't blowing and the windmills ain't working. You should have fired up a few more generators, built some bigger capacity traditional things before you start going into your unicorns and rainbows thing. So yeah, we're just trying to hold out hope that they don't start doing rolling blackouts. And then I think, and I can't be sure, and I almost let it slip on a meeting at work, I'm pretty sure if the power goes out, if the grid goes down, that all the people that work for a thing called ERCOT are going to get dragged out in the street and burnt. Because they had the...
Vigilante justice.
Dude, they had an opportunity. Because we've got, because of various things, whether it's economical, whether it's because of climate, whatever, but we've got an influx into Texas that is massive. People are leaving states like California, they're leaving hot places, or they're leaving cooler places and moving down here, but they're building these big ass freaking McMansions that require twice as much energy to cool them down and heat them up. And instead of building new substations and generators and stuff, they're building freaking windmills that don't work. Maybe they'll work 30 years from now, and this is this investment seed money to do the research.
Right.
But in the meantime, they're well, the grid's just fragile. It's it's not.
But even if
it's not when you build it right.
If it's fragile in its current state,
it's only going to get worse.
A couple years ago, when they realized that, they were given the assignment of changing that,
fixing
and
it,
giving the money to do that with.
Yeah,
and they had literally changed nothing.
No, they just built more windmills and hookers and blow. I mean, that's really at the end of the day where all that money goes to. I saw a meme yesterday that's wow, they'll sign a bill and spend $1 trillion and not read it, but they want you to explain how you spent $600 in your business. I think as people start to die from the heat, it's it's climate change. We need to do something. We need to give money to frickin' France. It's no, you need to give it to Texas.
Right.
And you don't need it to give us money. Dropping a boatload of cash on my front door isn't going to make it any cooler. You need to go out there in the field where there ain't nothing but windmills and build frickin' power generators.
Right.
That's what needs to happen. But
there's one guy in my subdivision who I've been kind of following him. I followed him for a while, actually, but I haven't followed him over the last year. But you know how you'll see people with those solar panels and shit? That's one part of the ruse. This guy went all out, and he did those Tesla solar...
the batteries?
No, the actual shingles.
Oh.
His entire roof is a solar thing. For every single shingle is. Plus, he has 2 wall batteries. And for a while, he would document for everybody exactly what was happening. And this was going on during the big freeze. He never lost power. He even was selling power back. Still, during the freeze. But it was so fucking expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But that would be, I wish. I wish I could figure out some way to be able to invest in something like that. Because that's basically like having a home generator. Man.
Well, and the thing is, and I think what happens... And we'll go to break here in a minute, but I think what happens is people are skeptical of new technologies because new technologies are big, they're loud, they're dumb, they're stupid, and they're not optimized, they're not fine-tuned.
Right.
So if you go back in time and you're hey, a car, a Model T, an internal combustion engine, you're well, I've already got the hay and the barn, and I know how to ride a horse, and I'm in and out, and I don't have to worry about cranking a thing or worrying about all the stuff that goes into a car, and you can be that's pretty silly. Why do I need a car? And they're all so damn expensive, too. And a Model T costs more than a horse and was not as efficient as one. It could go a hell of a lot longer, a hell of a lot slower, but if you need to go someplace pretty quick, you ride your horse, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of that's in development. Solar, well, the whole world is powered by solar naturally.
Yeah.
So of course solar is eventually going to be the way it's done, and as well as wind and water and stuff. But in the meantime, all these people are oh, we should just stop using fossil fuels.
No, I've been telling
it's
people
it's
for a
well,
while now.
that's a good goal to have for many years from now, but right now the technology is just not there. And you have to have pioneers like that guy who are willing to put in the cost. But it's also like the Prius, like like if you bought a Prius, it's never going to pay you back because the cost of the vehicle and the maintenance are more than any traditional car. But you have to have those people that are willing to buy that, and you have to have the companies willing to make them. And you have to have enough people that are going to buy it to try it to where it funds the investment back through, so they get better and better and better. Because if it wasn't for a Prius, you wouldn't have a Tesla. Yeah, at all. You just wouldn't have it. Because when you have a Tesla, you're thinking like in terms of maybe in good stewardship. But if you're spending like $80,000 on a freaking Tesla, you're not too worried about your electric bill. But your average apartment dweller isn't going to be able to buy one of those things for another 20 years. So you got to have both. And you can't make fun of people for liking it or wanting it, but you also have to be realistic about what you've got now.
Right, and that's one thing. And the thing about it is, this is back when I was in the oil and gas industry, which I'm, of course, not anymore. And I don't know what the numbers are now, but I remember at that time, one of the things I kept trying to get people to understand is 10 years ago, with all the solar farms, windmills, everything else we had, which at that time was a substantial amount. It was a lot, and they were looking to increase. At that time, the amount we had still only accounted for 2% of all energy production against fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. So imagine doubling what we had 10 years ago. You're still only at 4%. Right now, if I had to guess, we're probably at 15%. Max.
I wouldn't even say probably that much.
At maybe max. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, max.
So think about all the windmills and solar farms you know about now. We'd have to double all that, which has taken 10 years to get to 30%.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not feasible to think we can just turn one off and turn one on because we're not designed for that yet. Yeah, and it's a great idea, but you have to account for the now.
Not only that, but innovation. There's a lot of like, oh, well, it's just money. Get the government. A lot of innovation comes from failure. We tried it. It didn't work, so we had to retool. We did it 3 times. We finally found the solution. But you have to have the infrastructure in there to fail, but you have to fail upward over time. You can't just be like, well, and this will be in the next segment, like orcas are sinking boats, so we need to just flip off the grid and like turn on windmills. Like it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Yep. So let's take a break. Let's come back.
From the novel by Stephen King, creator of Carrie and The Shining, comes a chilling new tale. And it begins here.
Cujo? Cujo?
Cujo?
There's a new name for terror. Cujo. Directed by Louis Teague. Rated R. Starts Friday, August 12th. Please check newspapers for a theater near you.
All right, and we're back. So do you think the world is trying to kill us?
It feels like it. People keep comparing it to that stage in Super Mario where the sun is like just trying to get revenge for something that somebody did.
Yeah. even Republicans are starting to be like, well, this whole climate change thing, you're like, I don't know. We talked about it early on because it was tangential to what we were talking about. And I think you and I both have a very pragmatic thought process because neither one of us are alarmists. Neither one of us are like, oh, well, we've got, like we said in last segment, we've got to turn off, all of the coal and oil power generators because of the penguins. Like, that's just not the way we think.
It's not feasible.
But there needs to be a discussion that's not combative. And it can't be an all or nothing thing. But I think there needs to be a quicker discussion about some shit because you got orcas sinking boats. You got sharks just like on a rampage. You have freaking gators on a rampage. I'm surprised in the last segment, New Business, you didn't talk about the goddamn bison that killed the woman a couple of days ago. Like, just straight up murdered this chick. I didn't pull the story because I figured you would have, because it was like what we were talking about. But people are dying from the heat. They're dying from the damn cold. They're dying from the rain. If you're not here where it's 110 degrees outside, if you're a little bit further north, then you're getting hit with both Saharan dust and Canadian smoke. I talked to my uncle earlier today. He lives in Louisville, Kentucky. And in Louisville, Kentucky, it's somewhere in the mid to high 70s as far as temperature goes. But they've had torrential rains, threats of floods, and then Saharan dust. And Canadian fire.
Jesus. They got it coming from all ways.
So, I don't know what I would like to trade. The Saharan dust sucks, man. But it's not as bad as smoke. But at least smoke smells like smoke. It smells like wood fire. It'll kind of liven up your day a little bit if it doesn't turn the sky orange. There's just so much shit going on. Now, I do think I'm not positive, and maybe I think the Canadian fires. I think the fire in Canada was from a whole bunch of
lightning strikes, is what they're saying.
Okay,
there was a storm passing through, and there was just how you'll get these storms where there's lightning strikes all over a very large area.
Okay, I thought it was accidentally set by people.
No, it was lightning strikes,
okay,
according to what I've always read.
So
the beginning.
It doesn't make it any worse. It doesn't, or better. It doesn't make it any less. But it's not the subject we're going after. Because if people lit the fires and then they're just like, oh shit, and running away, then it's not like nature trying to get you.
Right.
But if frickin' God's throwing lightning bolts across some dry plains just to fuck up the people that live there, then yeah, it's not good. Oh man. But I think the world's been killing us for a long, long time.
It's definitely been you could say a hard trope for a long time. It's just, us causing nature to get revenge on us, whether it be through plants or weather or animals, which one of the earliest iterations of that is, of course, 1963's The Birds,
mm-hmm,
which is definitely about nature striking back. Yeah, and that was definitely the concept that Hitchcock was going for. There was a line in the movie where a woman says, "Birds are not aggressive creatures. They bring beauty to the world. It is mankind, rather, who insists upon making it difficult for life to exist upon this planet."
One of the greatest things about The Birds, and it's Hitchcock, so he was a genius at all kinds of pacing and storytelling. They never explain why the birds are attacking.
Yeah.
They just are. And so you can have all of your theories. What's going on? Why is it happening? All of the stuff that may be going on in the background that you don't know. But at the end of the movie, it's just birds attacking shit. No reason. Reasoning? Maybe, but we don't know what it is. And it doesn't help the people that did get attacked by the birds to find out later on that it was it was some weird migration.
Right. It's too late now.
Well, that would have been nice to know before my eyes got pecked out, but sure, thanks, man.
Yeah, like I said, that was just one of the earliest iterations of it, and of course, with the success of The Birds, there were a ton of movies that came out. about just animals striking back, and there were the frogs, and there was everything. I mean, Jaws quintessentially is nature deciding, fuck it, you fucked around, now you're gonna find out.
Yep.
And coming after us. But Frogs is another great movie. These people are. What can they do about it? They're stuck on this little island. They can't go anywhere, and these frogs are like very slow-moving frogs too. Which the Frogs is not a good movie, but
it's a memorable movie.
It's a very, very memorable movie just because of the subject matter.
It's funny you mentioned the frogs. I was thinking about you the other day because little fart face over here needs to go in and out, but it's hot, so she doesn't like it. But she needs to pee and she wants to smell things, so she asks to go out a lot. But then as soon as she hits the outdoors, then she pops herself back in. But she's a dog, and she barks at things, and she's curious about things. And about a year ago, I'm pretty sure she tried to eat a frog or a toad and made her sick. And we had to take her to the vet because we're like, oh man, why is the dog sick? And that was kind of the conclusion, because these toads that just kind of hang out in your flower beds and stuff, they're not like, they've got enzymes, and if a dog tries to eat them, it makes them sick.
Yeah.
So the other day, I guess we were already talking about the episode. I thought about you because she's like, I want to go outside. Like, flip on the light. It was about 9 o'clock at night. Like, flip on the light and open the door. There's one of those big-ass toads sitting on our doorstep, like, looking up at the door, like, got any bugs? And she, like, starts to run out, and then she stops and then slowly backs away. Because, like I said, I think she ate a frog, so she got her sick.
She knows she learned a lesson.
She's like, yeah, I'm not messing with that dude. And so, but there's this little fat-ass Jabba-looking mofo sitting on my doormat, like, looking at the door, like, ribbit, and scared the dog.
Well, interesting enough, you mentioned how the toad was kind of, looking for food, like waiting for something to eat. Another movie, and one thing that insects are some pretty amazing animals. Where you look at, strength versus size comparison versus humans and everything. If insects wanted to take over the world, it wouldn't be hard for them to. And one movie, and it's funny because I hadn't seen this movie as a kid. I didn't see this movie till about 6 years ago, but Kingdom of the Spiders with William Shatner. And essentially that whole movie is about, these spiders were fine until we started using pesticides to get rid of their food supply. And they had to find a new food supply. So they're like, well, there's all these livestock and people. Let's just go ahead and go for it. And it was nature saying, hey, you fucked around. You're going to find out now. That's how that theme kind of keeps coming up. But Kingdom of the Spiders was a good one. Stars William Shatner, of course, which is always fun to see him in something besides Star Trek.
Because if it's even vaguely interesting, he makes it extremely interesting because he just overacts.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not knocking him, but he's just like, wow, this is awesome, or this is amazing, and you're just like, it's a wasp, dude.
Well, I was talking to Melissa last night about Shatner for some reason, and one of the things that came up is his role in the movie Showtime. Do you remember the movie Showtime with De Niro and Eddie Murphy? So, Showtime is a movie. It's Eddie Murphy, Robert De Niro. They're playing two totally opposite from each other cops who get forced to be partners in a reality TV series. And because this is a new reality show, they want them to get acting lessons on how to be a cop. So they bring in William Shatner playing himself to try to teach them the things he did in T.J. Hooker. It is the funniest cameo. It is amazing because it's not young Shatner, it's older Shatner,
but it's himself
who's trying to do roles coming through doors and all kind of shit. It's really, really cool. But anyway, back onto the insect thing. One of the cool things about Kingdom of the Spiders is it implemented actual spiders. There's a scene where when William Shatner finally kicks the bucket in the movie, he's literally covered with hundreds of tarantulas. And it's not CGI, that's actually tarantulas. And that brings me to my next insect movie. One of my favorite horror movies, just because of its effectiveness, is Arachnophobia. It's an awesome movie.
And to be sure, for like our... I was thinking in terms of like nature trying to kill us, like not in a like, hey, we brought this thing into our world and now it's... Arachnophobia is one of those where like they didn't... I don't remember specifically. Did they bring the spider on purpose, or did it stow away?
It stowed away in a coffin.
Because they were over there being like, man, these spiders are no good. We should not be here, like messing with them, or like we shouldn't.
Yeah, it stowed away in that local guy's coffin, and then when it got out of his coffin, it decided to make a hybrid type of spider with one of the local spiders,
and then
that's when all hell broke loose.
Dude, arachnophobia will give you arachnophobia.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like Gremlins, where they made that movie and then they advertised it as a comedy because it had John Goodman in it, and he was known for being a comedic actor. And he does have a couple of
memorable, funny bits,
vaguely comedic scenes as he's preparing to go take on the spiders. Yeah. And he's kind of by himself and he's kind of monologuing and, you know, like by himself in a room being goofy. But when he gets out on the floor, like when he steps into the he's not acting comically at all. It's a serious movie. It's a scary movie, and it's amazingly good.
Oh, it's very, very well done. Very well done.
I remember whenever that movie came out and they were doing press for it, and they were talking with the guy who's the spider wrangler, and so they brought in all these different spiders that they were using for different scenes, and there was one particular spider that will flatten itself completely. Like it actually like flattens like a pancake to hide like under dirt and rocks and stuff. And they use that spider for whenever he smushes one, it's live and moving, and he like slowly puts his boot down on it, right? And
so
squishes
it.
It
Hurt.
You know what they like? It's not his foot in the boot. Like they have the boot and they have like, you know, up to the side of the camera, but it's just a close up of the boot squishing the spider. They put the spider down and it starts moving, and they just lay the boot on it and just kind of lay it down, and the spider itself flattens out because that's what it does.
Yeah.
And it's just a survival thing that it does. And I remember seeing that being like, oh my God, you could step on the spider. Like, of course you can't put 200 pounds of weight on it. But if it just like if a log falls or you know something gets on it, it just like flashes itself out.
Right,
it's like a flounder or something. That was awesome.
So moving on, another one that I enjoy a lot, and you know what's funny is Godzilla in and of himself, you know, is kind of exemplary of nature fighting back against what the United States did to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Godzilla versus my favorite of his villain kaijus that he fights, Hedorah, is specifically about a monster being created by nature because of our pollution and coming back after it, because Hedorah is, of course, the smog monster. And it's you know, if you listen to the words of the theme song whenever the movie comes on, of course it's in Japanese, but if you watch the subtitles, it's literally the entire movie is about us trashing the planet and the revenge nature gets on us by creating this monster, Hedorah. So, and like I said, Godzilla in and of itself is about revenge from nature.
Mm-hmm. They didn't learn because we've got Fukushima still spilling water.
Yeah, I know. I do know.
Did you ever see the movie Day After Tomorrow?
Yes.
Is that on your list?
Yes, it is.
Because that was one of those. I mean,
it's not necessarily a horror movie.
Well, no, it's a thriller. It's an action movie.
Yeah.
But that's got. I can't remember his name. It bugged the hell out of me because I couldn't place him. Have you ever had where there's an actor in a movie, like I'm looking at your arm, I'm seeing Bill Paxton, right? So let's imagine for a second that you remember Bill Paxton from his role in Terminator, right? As the punk
kid
that gets an arm punch through his chest. But then you see Bill Paxton in like maybe Twister, or even bring it down to something else like a romantic comedy or something. But you see him and you're like, man, I know that guy from somewhere. Like, I know him. And so you're like, well, he was in Titanic. You're like, I know that, but it wasn't that one. You're like, well, he was in Twister. Like, well, you're correct, but that's not what I'm trying, like, that's not where I'm trying to see him in my head. And then somebody's like, Terminator. You're like, he wasn't in Terminator. Because Bill Paxton's a huge, a big deal. Like, no, he wasn't, that wasn't him. Like, oh, wait, it wasn't. That's exactly where I'm looking for. The main guy in Day After Tomorrow, not the main guy, but
not Dennis Quaid,
the scientist guy was...
Dennis Quaid was the main guy. Yeah.
And I think it had... anyway, it had... And I cannot remember his name, but he was Ash in Alien. Ash in Alien, I'm trying to remember. Let's see.
Yes, yeah, Ian Holm. Yes.
And I watched that whole movie being like...
He's in Lord of the Rings, too.
I know,
so you know.
No, like, I know that guy. And I'm like, yeah, he's famous. He's in Lord of the Rings. Like, yeah, but that's not what I'm looking for. Like, where, like, I see him in my head, like, oh, shit, yeah, he's the one that's, like, he's the evil android in Alien.
Yeah.
He's like
a lot younger.
Yeah, but seeing him in that movie the whole time that I was distracted watching the movie, trying, like, you know how your parents would be like...
The Fifth Element, too. I didn't realize he was the priest in
that was
Fifth
the
Element.
thing. It was like, I knew him from Fifth Element, but I couldn't remember that he was an alien, and it bugged the shit out of me the whole time. Like, I know him
Dude,
from,
he's been in a lot of movies.
He has, but I was seeing him in that scene where he confesses to Ripley why he
was in Time Bandits. He was Napoleon. Dude,
that guy was on everything. Rest in peace, Ian Holm. You were awesome.
No shit, dude. That was crazy, man.
But he's a character actor that was in so many things, but he's got a few iconic roles that you just, and you're in your head. You know, it's happened with other people too, but that's one that just bugged the shit out of me. The whole time I was watching the movie, I'm like, that guy. Where, like...
Yeah, so Day After Tomorrow was definitely, it falls under that category. It's straight up a climate change message.
Yeah. Well, and the story behind that movie, do you remember Art Bell and...
Yeah, I remember Art Bell.
The late night call-in conspiracy show.
Coast to Coast
AM with Art Bell. He actually co-wrote that movie.
Really?
Day After Tomorrow. With some other people, because this is a long story, and we might have talked about it before, but it's actually starting to become somewhat mainstream science. But basically, long story short, is they have found mammoths encased in ice. Not like mammoth bones that were covered over by a glacier, but like full-on mammoths that still have fresh flowers in their stomach from like 12,000 years ago. And they're like, okay, so if you got fresh flowers in your stomach, man, so you were eating some flowers earlier that day, how is it that you became encased in ice? Like,
it'd be flash frozen.
Flash frozen.
Yeah.
How did that happen? So there's all these theories, because around 12,000 years ago, there was a massive climate shift.
Yeah.
And whether it was hit by a meteor or
I was talking to Melissa about that yesterday. As a matter of fact.
But whatever it was that happened, there was a massive loss of life and a huge climate change. And I think the mainstream, or like if it's not quite mainstream yet, sidestream science is saying that there was like a comet impact that threw up a whole bunch of shit in the air,
blocked out the sun,
and caused all kinds of problems, right? But how did this happen? So there's a scene in Day After Tomorrow where there's like rescue pilots flying down into like New York or something, and they're like, okay, we got to pick them up, and all of a sudden
they hit the wall and they flash freeze.
They just flash froze and just like fall out of the sky and like fall apart, because but their morning breakfast is still in their stomach. So like, and I remember seeing that because I had been listening to Art Bell, because I had a commute each day that was like because I was working retail, so it was like 30-minute drive at night. And every night I would drive home and listen to Art Bell. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Talk about aliens and the
I used to listen to Art Bell when I drive at night. Yeah.
That was so damn interesting. And if for those of you youngins, especially the ones out of West Side that I welcomed earlier in the show, if you're still listening to all of our weird ramblings, there used to be this thing in your car, and it was called a tape deck. And you put your cassette tapes in there, and you try to listen to Iron Maiden, and often you would be able to listen to Iron Maiden, but every now and then that tape deck would chew up that tape, and you couldn't get it out anymore. And every attempt to try to get it out would just chew it up, dig deeper. And you couldn't get in there to get that little tape out, so then you were just stuck with the radio. And you're driving down the freeway at 11 o'clock at night, listening to Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. Yeah, I learned a lot from Art. But yeah, Day After Tomorrow was either like executive produced or co-written by him from all of these people that were like trying to figure out why you could find flowers in mammoth stomachs from 12,000 years ago in tropical climates or semi-tropical. They're like in the spring, frozen.
Well, the thing about it is, the thing about Day After Tomorrow is, in my opinion, it did more to damage the cause of climate change than to help it, because it kind of portrayed it in a way everybody was like, where's it at? Because it literally happened within seconds. We went from one extreme to the next, and that's not how climate change works. And I honestly think, because South Park made fun of this movie, so many people made fun of this movie because of the extreme it went through, and it was promoted as this is what's going to happen if we don't stop driving cars.
Well, and let me because you were correct. The problem with the Day After Tomorrow is not that what they're portraying is specifically incorrect, is that there's no catalyst. In Day After Tomorrow, it's just like, okay, we're living our everyday life, and if somebody flushes a toilet one more time, the world's just going to flip its shit and try to shake us off. And everybody knows that that's not how that works. Yeah. The dinosaurs didn't just wake up one day and fall over dead. There was a meteor impact, and that meteor impact was big enough to cause catastrophic climate change globally. Yeah, immediately. And within hours. Yeah. And that's the same thing that they're talking about with like the mammoths. It's like 90% of the world's mammals went extinct like within days, about 12,000 years ago. So like, well, it wasn't just people hunting mammoths. Certainly they were hungry, but they didn't just freaking cause mass extinction from one season to the next. There had to have been something that triggered a massive revolt in the skies, and that's what it was missing. It was like people are just walking around falling down dead, but you've got no bad guy stabbing them. Yeah. You're just like, well, what happened? One day the Earth just decided no more. Right.
Well, while we're on more recent movies, we go ahead and bring this one up real quick, in which, wow, can a movie be terrible and good at the same time?
All the time. Most of them are that way.
Let's talk about The Happening.
The Happening sucked.
The Happening is actually a good movie in that it was casted poorly. In my opinion, that's what killed The Happening. The casting was terrible.
Mark trying to beat up.
Because Mark wasn't the best person for that lead role.
He wanted to throw his shirt off and be like, I'm gonna punch whatever it is making these people jump off buildings.
Well, Wahlberg can't be a dramatic actor, in my opinion. He has a really tough time with that. He's unbelievable in the role. If they would have casted it differently, it would have been better, because the story's great. It's nature getting revenge. It's plants enacting revenge.
Like they're sending out their spores.
They're like, okay, these people are hurting us and they're messing up our environment. We need to figure out a way to get rid of them. I know what we could do. We could send stuff to make their minds think they need to go ahead and just commit suicide. Because that movie has some scenes that are creepy as fuck. I mean, you got the scene where just everybody hung themselves. Or, people just start killing themselves for no reason. It's a suspenseful movie. It's a scary movie.
I think you're right. Actually, now that I think about it, it probably just has to.
John Leguizamo shouldn't have been in that movie. Wahlberg shouldn't have been in that movie. It should have been casted a lot differently. But it's a good movie.
Should put McConaughey in there.
It would have made a difference. It would have made a huge difference. But yeah. It's a bad movie, but it's also a good movie because it could have been a lot better. Because plants attacking people is a good theme, and I'll jump over to the ruins.
Well, before you even do that, I was having this because we were talking about it yesterday. Like, oh, hey, where are we gonna, you see, there's a plant, and I think it grows in New York somewhere, but it is so toxic that they will cordon off. Like, if they find it, it's kill on sight. But if they find it, they'll cordon off like an acre, because it is that bad that if like you breathe in its pollen, it'll fuck you up. If you touch it, it'll burn you. Like animals, if they eat it, then it tears them up from the inside. No, I can't think of what it's called, but it is a really, really bad plant, and they when they find it, they cut it up. But there's a lot of plants that are not good for you.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we can eat, but a lot of stuff we can eat was originally poisonous.
Yeah.
It
took some testing to get around where we could handle it.
Like tomatoes and potatoes. Like, there's a story, and it's absolutely true. You can Google it, where it's like the settlers here were like, hey, the Indians were like, hey, there's this thing called potatoes, and we love them, and we eat them. And so they took a bunch of potato plants and sent them back to England. And the chef in England didn't know that you were supposed to cook the root instead of the plant. So they cooked up the root and served it to everybody, and everybody got sick. And so England, I think it was England, they outlawed potatoes. Like,
because it came from the ground.
Because it
was a root.
It was sick. Like, they didn't know how to cook it right. But tomatoes or potatoes themselves are just fine. But tomatoes are part of the nightshade family, which is a highly deadly poison.
Yeah.
And humans are either stupid or smart enough to be like, well, that one didn't kill me, so let's breed that one with another one and like see if we can just minimize the death component. But like, plants are not our friends in a lot of ways. And so like,
well, plants have a survival instinct.
And people are stupid because if you like ever had a Boy Scout handbook, it's like, this is what poison ivy looks like. And it looks like a freaking plant with leaves on it.
It's 3 leaves and it has some hair on it.
I would.
But it's not easy for everyone because everything has leaves on it. It's not easy to identify.
What I'm saying is like, you get it's a drawing of a plant with leaves on it. It's like, it comes with these 3 leaves. So then you get out in the world and you're like, well, hey, what about this? Is this poison ivy? They're like, well, no, that's got 3 leaves that are in succession, not in secession. And so you have to understand the difference. Like, these ones have their fins like pointing backwards. And you're like, okay, so if I'm just some lost hiker, how am I supposed to know? They're like, well, look at the picture. You're like, that doesn't tell me anything. Right? Like, well, you shouldn't eat pretty much anything else either, because it's going to kill you.
Right.
Like, poison ivy is not good, but like, not poison ivy is not so much better. Well, it just won't make you as itchy as you die.
Plants are incredibly resilient, and plants are tough, and plants have a good survival instinct. I was doing a site tour yesterday at work, and we were talking about putting a tent out on the event lawn for a wedding. And they were like, well, how do you guys do it to where it doesn't damage the grass? I'm like, it won't. I could put a cement block right here and leave it there for a week, and I take the cement block off, and it'll look like it's damaged, but that grass will grow back quick.
Yeah.
Plants are a lot more fucking resilient than you realize. We do, controlled burns in our meadow every once in a while, and we'll burn that down, and a month later, it's right back to where it was before. Mm-hmm. Plants don't fuck around.
No.
They have, like I said, they have a survival instinct. Plants are amazing. It's pretty impressive. But I mean, when you think about what plants can do, think about an oak tree. It comes from a little bitty acorn that big, and it gets huge. And I love going for. We do these once a week. Our conservationists, the people that work in a conservation group, they do what's called the botany hike, and they get all the samples to put in the little discovery room for kids and everything. And I go on those hikes sometimes, and they like really know plants. I mean, their whole life is plants. And, we'll be out, and they're like, Scott, see that plant right there? It's like asparagus. And they'll go dig it up. We'll eat.
Nice.
They're like, hey, see that tree right there? They call it the toothache tree. Watch, let me show you something. They'll go grab a leaf off of it, say, go ahead and chew that real quick for about 30 seconds and spit it out. And I'll do it, and all of a sudden my mouth is numb.
Wow.
It is just all kinds of crazy crazy shit that plants are
amazing.
Swamp Thing was real.
Well, no, don't get me
Plants don't fuck
wrong.
around.
I'm a fan of plants. I am. That's not what I'm meaning.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, when you live in, like you're an animal. There's nothing or nobody that's going to tell a baby fawn not to eat poison ivy. Like it doesn't give them the same reaction that it gives us because we've separated ourselves from nature. Like, not saying that poison ivy is good. What I was saying is, ironically, is you look out into a green space and everything is all viney and it's somewhat thorny and it's all green and it's all got leaves on it and it's all dangling in front of your face, and they're like, okay, specifically this thing. And you're like, well, to me that just looks like a plant with leaves on it. Like, it doesn't specify itself. It doesn't pop out.
Yeah.
If you're like, hey, look for the roses. Okay, show me a rose. A rose looks like this, and they come in all kinds of colors, and they have a flower like this. Like, okay, as I'm walking, I can pick that out of a lineup. Poison ivy sitting over smoking a cigarette. Try me, bitch. You know?
And like I said, we're just staying with the plant thing. The Ruins is another movie just showing, the danger of nature. Luckily with the Ruins, for a long time, they were able to keep this particular plant contained to where it was carnivorous. And there are carnivorous plants out there. And imagine if those got really, really big, and you're walking around and you're like, oh, that smells pretty sweet. Let me go check it out. And you stick your head in, and next thing you know, you chomp down and you're slowly being digested alive. Plants can be a motherfucker.
That would certainly suck.
Oh, yeah. Dude, could you imagine? Imagine get your hand in it and you can't get it out, and it's slowly just being dissolved away.
Wow.
But yeah, The Ruins is another good one. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Another one that wasn't casted properly. It could have been a lot better than it actually was, but great story. It was actually, they used a lot of CGI with some of the effects, but they did a good job with it. So The Ruins is another good one. Definitely. So where you want to go next?
Well, I don't know if it's nature revenge or it's just natural disaster, because there's been a lot of those movies, but I do feel like humans don't necessarily respect maybe not the right word, or it is the right word, but it's in combination with another. But I'm going to go here in a couple of months. I'm going to go see Pompeii and Herculaneum, which are two cities that were destroyed by Mount Vesuvius. And if you're familiar at all with that story, you understand that there was a Roman resort town, two Roman resort towns, sitting at the base of the volcano, and people built their houses and their homes and their cities on this volcano. And one day this volcano erupted, and the people who were not burnt alive by the air and the water and the lava got buried in ash and preserved for all time. So the entire, basically the ground level was at ground level where they built the city, and the new ground level was 20 feet high, and it rained, and that was new ground level. And I guess, they didn't have disaster response in such the same way as we do now, but both entire cities were just destroyed, buried by ash and claimed by the earth. So then 2,000 years later, they dig them up, and they're like, hey, here, they knew the cities were there. They knew they were destroyed. That's all through the literature. But they couldn't get to them. Then they do. But if you Google Pompeii or Mount Vesuvius or Herculaneum, guess what's there? Resort towns and tourist spots.
Of course.
Sitting at the base and all the way up the volcano. It's not a dormant volcano. It's not like a Hawaiian volcano where it's actually spitting shit out every day. But it's not dead.
Right.
It's not extinct. It's just kind of sitting there waiting. It's like a fucking zit waiting to like pop again. And there's billions of dollars of industry and tourism and stuff that are just hanging out. But if you look at the history, you realize that these people didn't have a chance to escape. It wasn't like, oh, these are a whole bunch of backwards early humans that didn't understand. No, that mountain popped, and they were all dead within an hour.
You want to talk about flash frozen? I mean, aren't there didn't they find like stuff like people holding hands, people like in the midst of doing their daily job, and they're just there?
Yeah. And rocks
frozen in time. Literally frozen in time.
Have you seen that picture? There's a dude. He's a Russian. It was a male skeleton, but if you Google it, it's like horrifying. It looks like a Halloween skeleton spread eagled with a giant casing stone where his head should be, because the casing stone fell off of the building he was running away from or around, hit him smack in the head and killed him. And then he got buried by ash, so they scraped all the ash away, and they're like, oh, hey, there's a dude under here. And they finally get to a spot, realize that he's under like a 2,000-pound stone.
Right.
I think it's not in Pompeii, maybe. It might be in Herculaneum. They had enough time, because it was just that little bit further away. They had enough time to stage an evacuation. So there's all of these skeletons of people at a marina trying to get on boats to get away. And then... Whoop, buried for 2,000 years,
right,
or longer. Like, oh my god, what the hell? And then we go dig it up, and we're like, okay, let's go have a Bellini. You know, like
when you think about just in the grand scheme of things and natural disasters, you know, over time, the things that have like really harmed large numbers of people, you know, changed entire landscapes. We kind of do.
Yeah. Well, Yellowstone's a problem.
The San Andreas Fault.
Yellowstone's a bigger one. Because if San Andreas goes, like Superman notwithstanding, that ain't going to fall in the ocean. That's just a natural fault. There will be a whole bunch of damage. Shit'll fall over. And there will probably be like all kinds of biblical shit going on. But California isn't going to fall in the water.
Yeah.
Yellowstone is sitting on that dormant volcano that's like 2,000 years overdue for a massive explosion, and if it goes, so do we. It's like God holding a gun at our head. And the people who were like, "Hey, you know, God wants to love us and be happy," they didn't know Yellowstone existed when they were coming up, like talking about it over there, like. They had to discover Yellowstone, and they're like, "Oh, hey, there's a volcano here that's overdue for a temper, and if it goes, it's going to cause a mass extinction like what happened 12,000 years ago."
Right.
And whether it's coming from the sky or coming from the ground or what, you remember was it the tidal wave that. Was it the same one that took out Fukushima in Japan that we were talking about?
The tsunami
Godzilla?
that damaged the new.
That was it. The same tsunami that took out that. I remember there was like she was a supermodel, and she was on vacation with her husband or her boyfriend at a resort somewhere in Asia, and she survived because when the water came up, she got stuck in a tree. And it like broke her hip and her leg and her arm. She was all fucked up, but she was also tangled up in a tree. But he got swept away. And when the waters came down, everybody was looking on the ground for dead people, and she was like stuck way up high in a tree, and it took them a couple days, and she like never recovered. But just you've seen those videos of like the water goes out and all the kids run out onto the beach to pick up the fish.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden,
and then the
that
tidal
was
wave
the Fukushima
comes
one.
in.
That was
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrifying, and that's a volcano underground or a fault slip.
And that's just literally no warning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have 5 minutes to prepare.
Yeah.
there's nothing you can do.
Well, there's people out on the beach, so you're like set an alarm and just be like, "Hey guys, everybody come in." You're like, "For what?
Yeah,
is this a
they're
thing?"
not
Like,
they're not looking at the Drudge Report, getting updates. They're just hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way they knew what was going on. It's fucking terrifying. Like, seriously, and we're on the coast. We don't know what's out there that could happen here in the same type of impact, because it went pretty far inland, like way far inland. And even if it doesn't affect us directly, it's going to affect people 20 miles away. Mentally, that fucks with you, dude. It's some scary shit. And like I said, we're way overdue. Way overdue. All right, so before we wrap up, there's one movie I want to bring up, because I've never seen this movie. Okay? I have never seen this movie. I didn't hear about this movie that I started researching for this particular podcast. But my research has me planning on finding this movie to watch it because of the first line in this write-up. Have you ever heard of a movie from 1977 called Day of the Animals? Okay, first line of this little write-up. This is the one where bare-chested Leslie Nielsen gets eaten by a bear after challenging it to hand-to-hand combat.
gotta see that one.
Yeah, you think?
Is he oiled down? Like, did he get some like bear tallow and?
It doesn't go that deep into it. Nor are the bear and Mr. Nielsen the only creatures on a rampage. So apparently in this movie, all animals in this area that they're in, which it sounds like it might be Colorado, but I'm not sure just because of the altitudes, but all animals in areas that are over 5,000 feet in altitude suddenly become highly aggressive towards humans. You may be wondering why. I'll tell you why. Because after the depletion of the ozone layer, they have been exposed to too much UV radiation. And their wrath is our punishment for all the aerosol that we've been emitting into the atmosphere. It's 1977 this shit came out. The Day of the animals visit their anger upon a group of people out for a days-long nature hike led by Steve Buckner, who, despite being warned by a local ranger that there has recently been a lot of wildlife-related accidents, refuses to cancel his hike. This proves to be a fatal mistake, as animals of all different species. This is the thing. It's not just spiders. It's not just frogs. It's not just one animal. All the animals go nuts and decide they're going to go ahead and get revenge of everybody. The 1970s birds a considerable number of nature revenge movies that involve animals striking back against mankind for its damage to the environment. However, Leslie Nielsen elevates Day of the Animals above many other samples of his drama through a truly deranged performance that is by far the best part of this movie. I've got to see.
We got to see that.
We got to watch this.
Let's find it
movie.
and report back on it.
Yes, I have got to watch this movie. And like I said, I've never heard of this movie before.
Because, and if this is one of those things when animals attack, because Leslie Nielsen is the comedy godfather of the 90s and the late 80s, right?
Yeah.
But he was a serious actor.
Actor in the 70s.
He was a serious actor, and he's well known for being a serious actor. And he dipped his toes into comedy and just found out that he was really good at it, and made a whole second life career out of being comedies through Naked Gun and stuff like that. He is deranged and really, really scary in Creepshow.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know what? Whether you're watching Creepshow originally, like when it came out, and he was playing against type, or whenever later on you're watching it again and he's again playing against comedy type, he's frightening as hell. Like, he's just deranged as the jilted lover.
It's like a John Lithgow. He had incredible range.
And I find it awesome that he on his gravestone put a whoopee cushion joke. Sort of thing, you know, it's like he's just awesome. So
yeah, so Day of the Animals. Look for that. It'll give you a good idea of what we're causing ourselves to be in store for by the things we are doing to nature.
I dig it, bro. I think that's it. I don't want to have to go outside, but that's where my tape deck is. You want to go listen to the Two Life Crew?
Fuck yeah, let's do that for a little bit. Oh my
right, guys.
god, let's go old school, baby.
Keep it scary, guys.
Later.